You're very welcome back to another episode of the League of Ireland Women's National League podcast. I'm not quite sure what the name of it is anymore, but there's been so many rebrandings. We're firmly in World Cup final mode at the moment, just a couple of days. We will have a proper preview of that in the next 48 hours on the podcast. We'll be joined by somebody who has just started off on her own Spanish adventure by virtue of the Spanish being in that World Cup final. Someone who knows all about the World Cup final and even brought me back a gift. Thank you very much for that, Aaron. You've been to the World Cup. You're back. Thoughts on the whole experience?
Loved it. Loved every bit of it. And I'm sure your last, today was also out the World Cup. It was an unbelievable experience, not just for Ireland, but the fact of actually seeing the other games. I think I was asked sort of yesterday to pick a highlight. I struggled to pick a highlight from the trip. You know, I got to see Spain, Sweden, got to see Nigeria against Australia. Obviously, the Ireland games, England, Nigeria. Got to see some absolute epic events at the World Cup. The goal from Panama from 35 yards and the free kick. Like, there's been so many different things. It's been a highlight, the World Cup of highlights. And the great thing is that a lot of people had a lot of, how would you say, caution towards the World Cup because of the fact that it was expanded to 32 teams. But by God, the gap is closed between the worst team in the World Cup and the best team in the World Cup. And 100%. I think the expansion has been perfectly timed, and this World Cup has just shown how much it means even to the smaller countries. I think one of the highlights of football wise from not being at a game is probably watching Germany versus Colombia in the fan zone in Brisbane. 3,000 Colombian fans there watching the game, and when Casado scored for them, epic. You know, it was just unbelievable. What an experience! Great for Ireland to be there for the first time. Lots to take away from an Ireland viewpoint, but overall, I think the World Cup's been a massive success. I even managed to catch the games and then back home. It feels weird watching them on this side of the world, though. The only thing I will say is the Irish people are spoiled for the fact that every game is free to air over here. Same in the UK, because in Australia you had to pay for Optus Sport to watch majority of the games, which is a bit of a pinch point for a lot of fans. So thankfully I had fans on. But yeah, it was an unbelievable trip.
Well, I might be outnumbered by people who are at the World Cup in a few minutes. We're going to be speaking to Rachel Graham from Shels in just a couple of moments about her trip to the World Cup, about their season so far. The gap to the top of the table will get mentioned as well. And we'll also be talking about their new hat-trick promotion, which gives free access to the next 3 games to try and build on that wave of interest, particularly in Dublin, I suppose, around the...
Don't forget. They also have the Champions League, the little thing of the Champions League coming up in what, less than 3 weeks?
No, it's hasn't escaped my attention, but they will have that little trip, and they've got some nice games lined up. 2 games, of course. Now it's slightly changed. It's not a group anymore. It's a kind of semi-finals, and then maybe a final, hopefully, or a third and fourth place playoff. So they've been in this situation before the last couple of seasons. We'll talk to Rachel about all of that in just a couple of moments. But Aaron, before we sign off on your trip to the World Cup, pick your least favorite moment, seeing as you don't have a highlight. Ooh. Anything bad? Anything you would have changed?
Yeah, Perth.
I liked Perth when I was there.
I just found Perth.
Perth was very nice to me.
If I was to say things, there's 2 things. There's 2 slight regrets I have from the trip to Australia. One being the fact that I didn't get to Adelaide. It's the only World Cup stadium in Australia I didn't get to. And the other, that I didn't get a trip across New Zealand, but I got to see some unbelievable things. I got 8 World Cup games, 4 AFL games. Got to climb the bridge, the Story Bridge in Brisbane. Got to watch the sunset over the harbour in Sydney. You know, what more could I ask for? A trip of a lifetime. Thankfully, thanks to Ireland for qualifying for the World Cup and giving me an excuse to go to Australia. That's the way I look at it. And finished off with a long flight home. That was something I'm glad I don't have to do long flights for a while.
Well, do you know what? You're lucky, because there was a time when they didn't let people back from Australia when they sent them over there. So one other person who, of course, is just back from down under is Rachel Graham of Shelbourne. Rachel, you're very, very welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. I suppose we might as well start there. We're going to chat, I suppose, specifically about the Reds hat-trick promotion later on in the show, and it's something that people really should kind of stay tuned if they want to find out more about that, because it's a great offer for kids around the area to kind of get the experience of actually going to a game themselves and support the stars that are on show, yourself included. But first of all, World Cup, your thoughts on your trip over there? Was it football focused, or was it more about the fun?
I think I had a bit of both. I think I got to do a lot of touristy stuff, which was brilliant. We done snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef, went surfing, done all of that, and then obviously got the World Cup side of it as well, which was amazing. I can't even compare it to anything I've experienced before, and I'm sure Aaron was the same. It was just a different level over there.
Well and truly, like it's something. Everything that was there, like even the fact of the cities and getting to see things that we probably can only dream of seeing. Like I know you've been in Australia before, Breifne, but like when you get that chance, you sort of like, you know, you have to maximize. And I think that's the one thing that I tried to do outside of football was maximize the opportunities that were there. Like, and I think from a viewpoint, the great thing is that the amount of people that went over from Ireland, I think that's probably something that has to be recognised. I think the FAI said there was over 2,000 tickets bought directly from the likes of that they were aware of, plus the others that we don't know about that bought tickets directly through FIFA. Like I think it's unbelievable the support, and many people got a holiday of a lifetime.
Absolutely, yeah. You took the easy option out, though. You took a plane across country. I love to see you try the way I got across. And in terms of Shels, though, Rachel, it's been a kind of a strange season for everybody. We're seeing a lot of change, players moving around, but also not that much change either. Shels and Peamount still in that top 3 or 4 spots in the league when we get down to the business end. Your thoughts on the season so far?
Look, I think it's been a tough one. It's obviously been start and stop. We've had a break now of, if you take out the All-Ireland Cup, it's probably nearly 9 weeks. So you're kind of nearly starting a new pre-season and you're coming in and a lot has changed. The new faces we've lost. Jesse, obviously, who's a massive loss. But yeah, look, so far it's, you know, we're obviously not where we want to be. We're in second and 6 points off Peamount, but it's been a tough year because we've only played each other twice this year, and usually you kind of have the extra game to catch up the points you might have dropped, but there was little room for error this year, and unfortunately we lost and drew a few that we, you know, in other seasons we could have won. So look, Peamount have been very consistent, and in fairness, they do deserve to be top of the league. So we just need to focus ourselves now, and hopefully, you know, the end of the season goes their way.
It's been a strange one though, even with the likes of injuries as well. We've seen like yourself pick up a couple of knocks, Pearl Slattery as well, someone who's probably not missed many games. And with the shortened season, there was a lot of condensed games as well, where maybe previous years we've seen little bits of gaps where, but there was times where you're playing 5, 6, 7 weeks in a row. How do you sort of prepare mentally and physically as a player to know you've got this sort of season ahead? You've got the 12 games before the World Cup, 12 or 13 games before the World Cup. You've got the 8-week gap, and then you've got the second half of the season. How was that sort of from a player viewpoint?
It was kind of tough because we've obviously never experienced that before. We've obviously had breaks where we play 3 or 4 weeks, and you might get international window, you get a week off, and then you come back. But to have such a big break was really strange. And then we obviously had the All-Ireland Cup, which was, I think most squads kind of used as like, you know, rotation for a squad. So it was really tough. It's something that we never experienced before, so it was hard to prepare for. But we just come back now. We're back in training a few weeks, so it's nearly like you're just back in a little mini pre-season. You know, everyone's come back flying, so it hasn't been too much of an issue for us, to be fair.
Of course, the Champions League also, as Aaron mentioned in the introduction, Lithuania, some interesting teams in that section, or in that, whatever they call it now, the group. You've been to this stage before. Can you get out of that group? Can you get to the knockout stages proper? Even though this is knockout, it's all a bit strange. But
yeah, the format is obviously a bit different than it was years ago. But look, last year we competed, we won our first game. The second game then was obviously a little bit too much for us. So look, we always have a chance. We know Glasgow are going to be really tough, but you know, if we're on it and we're hard to play against, you know, they're, I'm sure, not expecting an easy game from us. So it's definitely doable, but I just think we need to be at our best to beat them.
Familiar faces in that front as well. Obviously, you come up against Claire Walsh and an ex-Red and Emily Whelan. First time probably coming up against Emily since she left. That'll be strange though, considering normally when they leave, they go to England, you don't really play against them again. But to have the opportunity to play against Emily,
yeah, that would be a strange one. Look, I've marked Emily enough times in training to know it's going to be tough. But hopefully, it's Pearl there, not me. But that gives us hope as well that there's players playing there who, you know, have played in our league and we've played against them. So, you know, we're not a million miles away from them. It might just be they're more full-time than we are. But I think quality and talent-wise, I think, you know, it's pretty similar.
You mentioned the fact that there's a familiarity there as well. Of course, it's not the first time that Glasgow have played Irish opposition. They played Peamount a couple of years ago, I think during COVID, back in 2020 perhaps, or 2021. Peas almost beat them, went to penalties on that night. Can you go that one step further? Can you kind of, which would be a big scalp for a team in the League of Ireland now, maybe bigger than it would have been before Scotland seemed to have got themselves so kind of a little bit a step ahead of us in terms of the professionalism.
Yeah, look, that's obviously the plan. We want to win, but I think we need to be clever. You know, we need to recognise the talent in the opposition and the level of the opposition that we're coming up against, and we might need to adjust our game plan that we normally have on a weekend. But it's about being clever at this stage. But I definitely think it's possible. It's 11v11 at the end of the day, and it's you always have a chance.
Considering a couple of league games before you head to the World Cup or to the Champions League, is it helpful to have the fact that you've got the league and you've got the cup, albeit your cup draw is probably one of the better cup draws for you? Is it better to have them couple of games, or how do you sort of ensure that you're fully prepared going into that? Because it's difficult having come from such a short break, because you're literally back into season for a couple of two and a half weeks, and then you're playing that game.
Yeah, for me, I would rather have the games. I think it's better. It's the best way to prepare for a game is playing games. So we obviously have the couple of games that we don't play in the cup weekend, so we probably arrange our own either in-house game or
you're right.
Yeah, we have a bye in that round, so that'll be a week. Well, it won't be a week off. We'll have different opposition than in the league, but I think it's better, because I think if you spend too long focusing and worrying about Glasgow, it just like that, it becomes a worry where we're focused now on our game against Treaty, and then we have Athlone, and then we go. So I think it's better that way, and it keeps you focused, it keeps you fit and sharp. I wouldn't want to be not playing for 2 weeks and then going away. I just think you're better off getting the games in.
In terms of, I suppose, the transfer window still kind of open for international transfers and stuff like that. We're seeing some business been done in the last couple of days, and even the last couple of minutes as we record this on Thursday night. Galway, 2 big announcements today: the signing of Julianne Russell and Orla Deasy. Shels, a couple of academy girls came in, 1 or 2 other signings. Last year you brought in a world-renowned signing in Heather O'Reilly. Can we expect to see anything from Shels? Have you any secrets now? I know you like to keep things fairly tight-lipped up there in Talk Park.
There won't be as big of a sign as Heather O'Reilly. I think you're all shocked by that one. But now we've signed a few. Some internationals have come in, and they haven't had much time to adjust, but they're in and they're doing really well. And we brought up Lucy and Katie then from the underage, who are super players and definitely one for the future. So it's just about getting everyone gelled together now before we go away. And like I said, the best way to do that is we've an away trip now to the Treaties, so might have a few sing songs on the bus and a few initiation songs out of the girls. But it's just about getting the team together now and getting us prepped for, first of all, our league games and then our Champions League games.
Who's the main driver of the initiation? Who can actually hold the note in the team?
I don't know if anyone can hold the note. Everyone's done it, and I think this rule is it's no phones, it's not put on social media. You just go up and you do it, and that's that. But in fairness, everyone's done it, so we'll hold the new girls to that as well.
What did you do back in your day?
Well, I never actually done it because
so you're doing it this weekend, then you just outed yourself. Love it.
It was funny because obviously we were Raheny and we merged with Shels, and our first bus journey, it was me, Per and Lowell saying, all the new girls, have to sing, and then we realised, oh God, we're actually new to Shels, we better shut up and say nothing. So we actually
you've just outed the 3 of you for the weekend. Congratulations.
Yeah, we've dodged it, but no. Under 30s only have to do it.
You mentioned there about the Raheny merger coming into Shels. For you, because you've been around this league for a long time, you made your 150th appearance for Shels this season. What keeps you going though when it comes to wanting to constantly, especially when you see all these young players coming in through the door? What keeps you going to want to keep playing and constantly keep playing and striving at this level though?
I think I just enjoy it. I always said, obviously we're coming towards the end now, and it's like I always said, as long as I'm enjoying it, as long as I'm still able to compete and play, I'll play. I mean, you're going out with your friends every week as well. It's nice, and to share these memories of winning leagues and winning cups and going away and playing abroad. It's stuff you can't really replicate in any other walk of life. I can't imagine any other way of doing it. But I think I've just always enjoyed it. It's something I've always loved doing and will do as long as I can.
But even with the hunger, considering what you've won, that's for me is the biggest because it's easy when you've won everything to sort of be like, I've won it all. Like for you to sort of continue to go out there and, especially when you look upon Pima win the league for a couple of years in a row and then to win it back, like where does who drives the standards within Shels? Is it the senior players? Is it the younger players now coming in, trying to bring them on even further? Who's the sort of main driver?
Look, obviously, myself, Pearl and Noel are the senior players in the squad. But to be fair, like we've never really had to motivate the younger players. They've always wanted to be hungry and eager to win. And the thing with football isn't a win and success. You get greedy. You're not happy with winning one. You say, I want to do it again. And even we won the league in the double last year. It's, the week later, it's like, okay, what can we do for next year? Who can we get? Who can we sign? How can we win it again? Basically, like I don't think you're ever fully satisfied with, okay, I've won it and that's that now. I just think you're always greedy. You're always hungry to win more.
Shels have a really good tradition of bringing really good players through that academy. We've seen them go to the UK particularly over the last maybe 6 or 7 transfer windows, the likes of Emily, Jamie, plenty of others. There's maybe half a dozen or more. In terms of what the girls that are coming in, are we likely to see some of those girls coming through that might be at that same level in a couple of years' time and looking abroad or looking to become kind of no more than yourself, Noel and Pearl, those kind of established players in the team?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, we've Lucy and Katie now who are going to come to Lithuania with us, and they're starting to get blooded in. And I mean, they're very talented players. And then obviously Hannah Healy and Rebecca Devereaux have been in the squad since earlier in the season. And I mean, Hannah was 15 and she was starting games for us. Like, that's scary. But no, the talent is definitely there. And I think the structures now are a lot better than they were years ago, and they're getting the opportunity to, become the best they can be, whether it's here or if they go abroad. But definitely there's a lot of talent. And even we played Peamount at the weekend, and their young players are very talented as well. So it's not just at Shels, it's all over the country. So it's brilliant to see, and whether we can keep them or whether we can't, we just want the best for Earley League and our players.
A bit of a two-prong here. First one's more of just an observation in terms of, like, I remember watching Rebecca Devereaux at the start of the season, and I can't remember the game, she literally turned and shot, and you'd swear she's playing the league about a year or two. The confidence in her. But for you though, Rachel, like, how do we keep these players? Like, we're talking about the league sort of growing, and we're talking about the league moving to more professional thing, because as somebody who's coming through the ranks of the league from a younger age, how do we keep these players going forward? Because, we see constantly that the best talent is sort of handpicked away to go abroad. How do we keep the best players in the league?
Yeah, like, I think, first of all, like, you never deny the player to go and play professional. And if it's a great opportunity for them, you don't want to deny them that. But sometimes players go away and they're not actually going to a better level. They're just getting that chance to train full time and, be a class as a professional. So if we can get that into Air League, where we're training full time, or they have the status of being professional, I think we get to keep a lot more. And even they're going over, and it's not as lucrative as men going over. Like, they still need to get their education, and they'll be back at some stage, and it'd be nice for them to have degrees. So whether we can get them into colleges here, into full-time training programs, could be something to look at. But look, I'd never deny someone an opportunity or tell someone not to do it, but just make sure we're not losing out, that we can offer them the same opportunity here. And obviously it's not easy, and these things take money and time, but it's definitely, I think, something that we should be looking at to do for our younger players.
Is the PFAI involvement at the start of the season, where the league went turned professional and adopted the same level, I think, as one of the men's divisions? I'm not quite sure off the top of my head which one it was, but there was a minimum wage that had to be paid to somebody to be professional, which is a decent amount of money, but in the current climate within the women's game in this country, probably unrealistic to have any more, maybe than, 1 or 2, maybe 3 at a push for some of the bigger clubs. But it's unrealistic to have 15 or 20 girls on that rate to be full-time professional, because you're talking probably about something in the region of 300,000 or 400,000, which is the same as a men's team have, with not huge audience, but comparatively much bigger audiences and sponsorship and backing and that sort of stuff. So is it a double-edged sword for teams to now have to rise to that level to give a girl a professional contract?
I think, look, it's obviously tough. I'm pretty sure Rovers are the only people who have professional contracts. Nobody at Shels is on one. But look, you always have to be looking to step forward, and that's obviously the next step of the game. Every team is not going to be ready to do it yet, but to have the option to do it is great. Even like you said, Emily going away and Jamie going away, like the club don't get anything for that. And they've obviously put a lot of time and resources into it. So if we could have them players on professional contracts, the clubs would benefit a lot from them. But look, it's unrealistic to have everybody on professional, but it's the step we need to go, and it's having the option to have it is definitely the way you want to go. But you can see even in the men's games, they're struggling probably to pay wages every week. So I think it's just having the option there to do it, whether it could be semi-pro, maybe is a bit more realistic. I'm sure that's the same in the men's game, but I think it's great to have it. Definitely it's a step forward. It's the way we need to go. But realistically, I'd say it's a good few years before every club is available to offer full-time contracts.
But for you, considering when you first would have started in the league to where it's come now, it must be nice to actually see, while maybe you may not benefit from the professional contracts, but to see the next generation or the generation after that will potentially benefit from the option of having that sort of thing like the men. That must be nice, though.
Like, sure, only a few years ago, we had to pay €300 to be allowed to play in the league, which is crazy now when you think about it. And if we say that to the younger girls now, they're like, baffled by that, but we didn't know any different. So it's even not being out of pocket is a big thing. Like, obviously we can get expenses now and stuff, which is a huge help, but it's obviously come a long way since then, and it's only going to get bigger and better. But whether it's professional contracts, I don't know, it could be semi-pro or even covering someone's tuition to go to college could be another way of doing it and keeping players here, but it's definitely on the up and we just need to keep it that way.
You might talk about the resources required, and of course the resources generally come in from partnerships and sponsorships and ticket prices. So obviously Shels crying out for money like the rest of the country's football clubs are charging really big money into the next 3 games. Is that correct?
Well, if you charge €0 in, I think you can't complain.
That's what I was getting at. Of course, we talked about it at the very, very start of the segment, but it's the Reds hat trick. Shels are opening the gates of Talcott Park. Anyone who wants to, it's not limited to age or income or anything like that. Anyone who wants to go to a game, bring their kids to a game. If you have young girls in the house, do get them down to a game, even if they've only have a passing interest in football. Just give them that experience. You never know, it could start something in them that might see them in a couple of years' time being in that red jersey themselves, or wherever they happen to be and whatever they happen to end up. It's a phenomenal, I suppose, given, again, we talked about limited resources for Shels to do that, because they're really giving nobody an excuse to say, oh, well, I'm not paying a $5 or I'm not paying a $10 into a game. It's free in for the next 3 games. They're at loan on the 2nd of September, Sligo Rovers on the 18th, and Bows on the 4th of November. I think there was a slight mix-up. I'm not sure if they wanted to give away the Bows game, but they got the games away. We did get 2 versions of the press release, and I'd say whoever counted out the 3 is kind of kicking themselves, because Shels Bows is a big game that would draw a big crowd, but there's a potential to fill Talcott Park for that game now.
Oh,
if it's going to be for both teams.
Like the thing just before Rachel comes in here, but the thing is, and I know for a fact they've done initiatives with Bows before to sort of help with Bows season tickets, to get Bows season ticket holders in for the women's game as well. Like the thing about it is, Breifne, is that it's not the first time Shels have done this, and I think that has to be recognised as well. There was a game, I think was it the first ever game live on TG Car, or one of the first games live on TG Car. They literally just tweeted a couple of days beforehand, listen, it's free in, come and watch the game. I think that, and I think it's a bit of smart marketing, but it's also, as you say, trying to capitalize on how can we get, if they get 100 fans who come to games after going to 3 free games and pay in or buy or come and watch the team regularly, that's extra fans to their fan base, and I think that's probably the most important thing. And I think everybody's talking. We talked about it at the start of the show about the World Cup, about the positives of the World Cup. And it's one thing that me and you have had many conversations of. It's about how are we going to have a legacy from a World Cup. And this is the first that we've seen of a National League club or a League of Ireland club, as it is now, actually going to try and put a legacy there. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit surprised to see others haven't jumped on the bandwagon and said, we're going to do something similar, because I think from Shels, it's a smart marketing ploy, and it's something that could really work out in their favour. And listen, trying to get people to the gates, I'm forever trying to tell people to come and watch games, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for it.
Rachel, from your point of view as a player, obviously the money side of things doesn't really come into your head when you're preparing for a game, but what's it like to have that bumper crowd and a loud, noisy kind of cauldron at home against teams like you're facing over the coming weeks?
Oh, it's huge, and obviously seen growth in the last few years with air crowds personally, and then obviously Rovers and Bows have done great with their crowds as well. But we're just, off the back of the World Cup, kind of, how can we promote that? Obviously, the girls have done great, and there's young girls watching them on TV, but to let them know this is on your doorstep as well. And we had Anya and Abby who are playing in the World Cup, who are, you can go see them playing a Saturday as well. But look, it's free to come. It's 3 games. I think there's a link to sign up to, whether you can make 1 game, 2 or 3. It doesn't matter. It'd be great to have a crowd there, and we play at Loan the weekend before we go to Lithuania, so that'd be great to have a nice send off for us. But we just want to promote the women's football here, the league, and show it is quality, and you can watch it all you want on the telly, but you can't beat a live game of football.
Can't beat the fact of the best thing about the League of Ireland for me is post game. You see all the kids just running onto the pitch. I think for me that's probably one of the best things. Rachel, for you, I don't know what it's like from being a player when you see all the players coming running up to you looking for photographs and autographs. That must be nice.
Yeah, like obviously years ago, pretty much it was friends and family in the crowd, and that was pretty much it, to be fair. But in the last few years now, there's kids and they can't wait to meet you after the match, and it's like it's a breath of fresh air, and it's a lovely thing to see. And these girls are watching you play in a weekend, thinking, that could be me one day. And I just think it's a brilliant thing. And we need to, make sure we nurture that and keep that within our game. And, with the free entry here, hopefully we get a few bigger crowds in for our games.
You're involved in the game a long time. I think we had the pleasure of actually facing off against each other back in the old DWSL days. I would have been coaching, I think, Dublin City. I remember playing you in St. Anne's Park. Was it St. Anne's Park?
Yeah, St. Anne's, yeah.
Yeah, and he absolutely wiped the floor with us. And like you talk about the players that were playing that day for you. Diane Caldwell was there, Shauna Cook was there, yourself. I think potentially Noelle was there at the time as well. Avery Burke might have been in goals. It was like all these girls that went on to have stellar careers from one group of players that kind of came up under Derek Cook, I suppose, really back in Raheny. And you technically a two club player, but really it's always been kind of the same nucleus. So we'll give you the one club player. What's it like after 20 years with more or less the same group of girls as the core of it to still be at the level you're playing at now?
Like that's what I was saying earlier, the likes of Noelle and Pearl. Like I've played with them since I was 15, 16, and they're my best friends. But obviously look very lucky to, grow up in that group where we had all those great players who have stuck around and stuck with it and are keep playing and keep achieving. But I know it's brilliant, and I think the young girls don't realise how lucky they are that, we played in St. Anne's and we used to carry the nets down from the clubhouse and put them up and take them down, whereas, that'd be a very foreign concept to them. But look, that's what, that's some of the best memories I have playing in Raheny, playing in St. Anne's. So it doesn't even have to be at the best level to make friends and, make great memories. But I know it's been brilliant being able to do it. And obviously we moved from Raheny to Shels, but I just feel like, when you have the same group of girls around you, it's, you can't beat that feeling.
I never asked this question, but what was that merger like though for you players? Because at the time, Wexford had just won the league. It was the first time that we'd sort of seen the massive dominance because you won a couple of trebles. You just won the League Cup. Katie was still, which is you'd still had the likes of Jamie coming through. You had lots of young players coming. What was that like though when you get told that, we're becoming Shelbourne, the whole Raheny United ethos, the whole Raheny United's way of things is changing?
Yeah, it was obviously like a bit scary because it was so unknown. But look, I think we knew ourselves that the club couldn't sustain the cost of a League of Ireland setup. But look, Raheny were brilliant to us. We've great memories there. But like I said, it just became too much. So obviously we merged with Shelbourne then, which was, it was a bit unknown. But we went into it, with an open mind, and we had a lot of good senior players. They had a lot of good young players. So it actually worked really well. Obviously the first 2 sessions you get to know each other, but like I said, first away trip on a bus and everyone's laughing and joking. It's fine then. But look, it's been brilliant for us. Shels are an unbelievable club to play for. They look after us so well. But Raheny done as much as they could, but it just eventually became too much for a grassroots club to have a League of Ireland budget. And look after us in the way that we needed.
I remember having conversations with Derek, and I think Chuck Dwyer at the time was very involved. I'm not sure how involved Chuck is anymore, but I'm sure he's still floating around somewhere. But it's great to see the path, and I suppose that merger or that transition. There's so many trophies and so many international caps at all levels, from schoolgirls right up to the senior team, and of course the World Cup this week or this month had plenty of Shels / Raheny representation in it as well. It's a huge success story in women's sport, I think. And I think over the next 3 weeks, we give a chance maybe to the next generation to get their first taste of the League of Ireland Women's Premier Division. We'll put the details on all the, if you're looking at this or you're listening to this, it'll be in the description in terms of the link, but it's shelbournefc.ie/hat-trick. Rachel, it's been a pleasure. We've probably taken way more of your time than you were expecting. We really appreciate you being so generous with your time for the last half hour or so. The very, very best of luck for the rest of the season in that little title chase. We've seen teams slip up before. We hope for your sake that it'll be entertaining and maybe might give you a chance to sneak in and win a third title on the bounce, but it's going to be an uphill task for the next few weeks. And of course, best luck in that Champions League endeavour yourselves in Lithuania in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Rachel Graham there from Shels. Aaron, maybe let's talk about the Champions League. I know it's a few weeks out yet, but we've seen teams do reasonably well at this level, particularly maybe the first game, and then the second one tends to be a little bit of a higher standard. But your thoughts about where they're facing into Glasgow could be interesting for them. Can they get up through it?
To be honest with you, it's probably the right sort of time to play in Glasgow in terms of how things are with the Scottish League. I'm more intrigued to see how they get on, for the fact of with Ireland getting through the Scotland in the playoff last year, then to sort of see how they mix and match. It won't be easy. I think Rachel sort of alluded to the fact of the full-time training compared to sort of training part-time as well. There's a big difference. But for Shels, I think they just need to build a bit of momentum to get into that. I think they need to have a couple of convincing league wins. If they can do that, then to go into that, they'll put themselves in a good spot. Lithuania, it's Lithuania. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. Like it's a tough and out trip. It'll be warm over there. But I think that they'll sort of, if they get through Glasgow, you'd probably say Glasgow might be the top seeds in the competition. So if they can get through Glasgow, they have a good opportunity. And like for me, I think something that I want to see over the next couple of years as part of any sort of strategic plan from the FAI, from anybody involved in the League of Ireland, is that we start to see the teams sort of getting past this stage and maybe getting to it. So I'm hopeful that, I think they'll put in a very good showing. Are they capable of beating Glasgow? If the ball falls in the right court, I think they are capable of beating Glasgow. Will they beat Glasgow? They'll have to be on their A game to beat them. There's no doubt about that. But I think they've got some young quality talent in there, and I think they'll go all guns blazing. And if they get through that potential meeting with Ginter Universities, if they win their one, Ginter have been no surprise that Irish teams played Wexford a couple of times. Wexford obviously beat them once in Poland. They beat them. So there's no real surprise. A couple of players who've played in the league, the likes of Maddie Gibson's played for Ginter. Rio, I can't think of her second name, who was with Shels in the first half of the season. She played with Ginter as well. We've had a couple. So be no surprise to Irish teams. And listen, I'm looking forward, but the only thing I'm going to plead is please hope that the game is going to be streamed somewhere so we can actually watch it. That's all my only request now for the next couple of weeks.
Your thoughts on the format change? Obviously, we've had it for a couple of years now. It kind of came in through COVID. As someone who's been to that stage of the competition where it was a group, you played 3 games, I felt that extra game, even if it didn't mean you progressed, the best team in the group would still come out of it. And generally, you can kind of predict who that's going to be. But
I don't like it.
I don't like it either. I think the extra game just gave you that opportunity for that bit of experience to play another game at that level. I felt really pushed some players on.
But like, what happens if you make something happens in the game? So say something happens, you can see the last minute goal in a really, really tight game against the number 1 seeds, you're out. Whereas it could be a really, really tight group and it could come down to something silly that. But I like the 3-game group. I thought it was good, and Like, I understood why they done it at COVID because of the fact of limiting the amount of time that they spent. I think it was 2020. It was 2020 when Shels played, when P-Man played there, because I remember it was the height of the restrictions over here. I like back then you were just happy just to have Champions League football, but I don't know. I think at the minute the competition is sort of geared too much towards bigger countries and things like that. Maybe in the coming years we might see something similar to a Europa League for sort of a second string team, second string the slightly weaker countries. But I think in order for us to ever really have a proper opportunity of doing well in the Champions League, we're going to have to retain our best players. But as Rachel says, you can't stop a player. Likewise, you can't stop the likes of a player going to Shamrock Rovers because the financial offer, the offer of a professional contract is better. When we seen the six leaving Shelbourne, like you can't blame them, even though the opportunity of Champions League football was there. So I think it's a tough one, but in order for us to sort of see progression from Ireland in the longer term, we probably need to make sure we have all our ducks in a row.
Absolutely. Let's maybe turn our attention towards the domestic league. Of course, we've been focusing over the last few months on the World Cup and also on the Avenir Sports Cup. Just to wrap that up, I suppose we haven't really probably had done a proper wrap up with that because of the World Cup, but your thoughts on that quickly in terms of is that competition something you'd like to see grow potentially into a Setanta Cup style tournament, or even, and I'm going to throw out there, a mixed league between the two associations?
The tournament as it was is not viable in terms of the way the format was done. I don't want to see this competition again if it's done the same way as we've had. It's either going to have the same amount of teams from the north, the same amount of teams from the south, or it's going to have every team from both. That was the only thing that sort of put a bit of a distaste for me, is the fact that we only had half the teams from the Northern Irish League and we'd all the teams from the League of Ireland. For me, that was the only thing. And I said at the start of the tournament, it didn't sit well with me. In terms of the football, brilliant, great, loved what I got to see of it. For Galway United to win the first ever senior title, absolutely delighted for them. Gemma McGuinness scores and then goes off to AFC Bournemouth. We wish her the very best luck with that move, but it was great. We got to see a lot of players who we may not have seen an awful lot about. We got to see some more of the kids from teams do well. And like, for me, the actual tournament as a filler for the World Cup was perfect. Was a great stopgap. Maybe you would have liked to see quarterfinals in it, but listen, that's just probably being nitpicky. But I think it's been brilliant, and credit to the FAI and the Northern Irish Football League for actually coming together and saying, hold on, we need to do something to help promote it. If you turn around a couple of years and tell me there's going to be an All-Ireland League, yes, there's a lot of questions you'd have in terms of how structures will work and stuff like that. But I wouldn't be object to it. I wouldn't object to it. I was a little bit concerned about the standard of football comparing both leagues, but I thought the Northern Irish Football League has shown us how far it's come on in the last couple of years since they've qualified for the Euros in England. And listen, it was great. There was so many positives about it. Got to see a lot of games. Got to see both sides of the border. I think I don't even know if I went to one game that was all League of Ireland. Every other game had a mixture of both in it, so got to see a lot of both. And listen, you won't hear any complaints from the actual football on the pitch. I really truly enjoyed it. What was your opinion of it, though? I'd be interested.
I thought it threw up some fascinating clashes that we would never see in normal circumstances. And for players who've been playing maybe in the league for a couple of seasons, to see some different faces across the whitewash is a nice change. Different clubs, different venues, different trips, different stopping points, a whole load of new experiences, I'd imagine, for a lot of teams traveling up to the north and playing up there. I thought the standard of football was excellent. Obviously, maybe a shade off maybe what we see week on week in the league, but given the I suppose players like Rachel not playing part of it, some players been at the World Cup, albeit very, very few in a playing context, but a lot gone over maybe to as a break, as a holiday. We saw a lot of new faces. I thought the final was excellent. I thought it was 1-0, but it could have been 6-6. It was just phenomenal. And I think it was really bright for the women's game on the island of Ireland. And I think that's probably what they set out to do, to kind of fill that gap. It does replace the old League Cup, which isn't a bad thing either. So plenty of things going forward. I was hugely honoured personally to have been asked to commentate in the final, and to be there and to kind of see Galway win that trophy was it was to kind of not necessarily share in it, but to kind of observe their delight at it was pretty class, I have to say. This week's fixtures, obviously, back to the bump and grind of the normal league fixtures. We have a game live on TG Car. We've also
let's start with the TV game. I think just because that's the league leaders. I know I said to you earlier on before we started, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
Peamount United and TG Car in PRL Park.
It doesn't go well for them. But
I'm glad you turned around straight away and said it. There's been 3 games in PRL Park on TG Car. Can you tell me how many times Peamount have won the game?
Well, they got beaten by Galway. Did they draw with? Got beaten by Galway to lose the league 2 years ago. They dropped points against Wexford. Did they draw from a winning position or did they lose from winning position? I can't quite remember.
They drew 3-3.
Yeah, and then I can't remember what the third game was. Was it Galway again?
No, it was the week before they played Galway.
Must have been Shels then.
It was DLR.
Okay, my mind.
Eve Bandana had the game of her life in a 0-0 draw. Saved the penalty from Tegan Ruddy. James O'Callaghan, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but I had to bring this up. Maybe it's a good omen that they might break at the weekend.
If they lose, you're off the Christmas card list. That's all I'm saying. It hasn't gone well for them in the past, but at the same time, I think this is a slightly more determined Peamount than we've seen. They've kind of got a point to prove. They lost a couple of players. We've talked out to death on the show this year. And they'll want this league title more than they probably wanted any other league title in the last 10 years. I think they want to come out and say, you can take the big names, you can take the experience, but this club is here to stay. And whether that's true or not, whether that pans out, we talked just moments ago about Raheny having to bow out. And maybe that's something that's in Peamount's future. Maybe not this season, maybe not in 5 years' time, but it's probably going to come at some point. Because of the nature of the relationship there. But we all expected it this year. It hasn't happened. And I think the girls at Peamount want to show that they're there. Could you imagine that team going, you can all link up with the men's teams, but we're staying with a junior side and we can beat all of you. It's a huge statement.
It's stubbornness. It's a massive statement. And do you know what? I say this often, and I've said this to so many people. A lot of credit has to go to Dennis Cummins. Dennis Cummins is just Mr. Peamount. He is, when it comes to the women's side, he loves absolutely nothing more. You can see Louise Quinn when she's filming stuff before the World Cup in Peamount. You can see how much of an influence the likes of Dennis has had on Louise. And I think for me, to see them still in the league, considering the heritage they have towards the women's game, is massive. I do, unfortunately, see a time where maybe it may not be the case just because it may be taken out of their hands in terms of licensing, unless they can come up in an agreement with maybe a St. Pat's or something like that, that it may become something that the FAI sort of force their hand down the line. If they do, then it'll be a sad day for Irish football just because of what they've done. But like, if I was to turn around to you now, Breifne, and say to you, 6 games left in the season, who'd be your player of the year? You're straight away, you're going to turn around to me and probably pick 2 Peamount. You're going to pick at least 2 Peamount players, and potentially, you could say at this stage, are all 3 nominations for the player of the year going to come from Peamount, with Kate Mooney, Sive Doyle, and Karen Duggan, potentially?
Well, yeah, two of those would definitely be my top 3, and I'm struggling to think of somebody to replace the third. It's been superb performances week in, week out from Peamount, but it's going to be interesting to see if they can seal this, because we've seen them drop points at this stage of the season before. If they can hold their nerve this time around, and I do think that experience 2 years ago will probably be the difference now when they go into games that they should be beaten. They're now taking 3 points from.
I reflect back to when we had James on the show last year, and he was telling us how much it hurt. And I think from not just for James, but for the likes of Sive Doyle, Chloe Maloney, Lauren O'Callaghan, Dervla Byrne, Nevri Burke, Karen, all these sort of players who were there when that happened. There's a massive point for them still to prove. Last year, it sort of was a case that the middle of the season, that blip in the middle of the season, where the second half, towards the end, it just become they ran out of games. Whereas when you look at when when they draw with Shamrock Rovers in the league, you're probably thinking at home they should have beaten Shamrock Rovers. Then when they go beat Shamrock Rovers on TG Cahir in Tala the last round of games, you're sort of thinking, wow, like in terms of fixtures, like Bows will be the highest ranked team left in the league this season. They finished with Shels, finished with Rovers as well, and like I think the way they've sort of shown the character to even when they were beaten by Shels, I think they went and won 5 games in a row after being beaten by Shels in that game where they were 1-0 up and then all of a sudden capitulated in the second half, and that sort of shows the character. And like you can't question things like their fitness levels and stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong, I get on very well with the lads in Bows, but if Bows were to go and pull a result off them this weekend, for me it'd probably be a massive surprise. And I don't say that lightly because of a lot of time for people in Bows. I think they're playing very well this season, but just the way Peamount have had that consistency this year, I would expect them to start the season. The only concern being not necessarily the TG Cahir thing, but the fact that it's the first game after the break. Rachel mentioned earlier they played Peamount, played Shels last week in a friendly, so probably the ideal team to play the week before you go back to start the season.
Absolutely. And let's move on to some of the other games taking place over the weekend. Of course, Galway host Cork. Galway on the bounce of that win in the Avenir Sports Cup. The loss of Gemma McGuinness slightly, compensated today in terms of the signing of a fairly big name in the Irish game. And that's Julianne Russell returns after a little bit of a break for personal family reasons. She's back in the game this half season effectively. Orla DC just announced as we went to press today with this. So she's a big name. We've both talked about how much potential she has. Didn't quite work out for Wexford. But I've been impressed by the fullbacks in Galway, and I spoke about it when I was doing the commentary in the Avenir Sports Cup final. And I think she might struggle to get into that team as well, because you look at both those fullbacks for Galway, the likes of Therese Kennevy, very impressive, solid, probably stronger, just physically in terms of being a little bit older than Orla DC. She might not see that much game time.
Then again, it might be Phil Trill's idea to get Therese Kennevy out of there, because if you look last year,
not out of the club,
out of position, because you look last year, Therese Kennevy played in the 6 last year quite a bit, and she was superb, absolutely superb. I think the idea, if it could be an easy option from just to sort of put Orla in there and put Therese into the 6 and sort of use Therese as someone who gets on the ball a little bit more and breaks up attacks. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. The only thing is, although they've announced the signing now, it's not like she's only just joined the club, because she's been with them for a good couple of weeks as far as I know. So she'll have time to have bedded in, probably played in a couple of mid-season friendlies as well. So I think team news on Saturday will probably be very interesting from that game to see where she goes. I think Galway are definitely going to have a massive bounce from the All-Ireland Cup, but I also think Cork will have a massive bounce. I think for the fact that Danny Murphy got that side to the semi-finals as well, only beaten 1-0 by Cliftonville in Belfast. There's a lot that they'll take from that as well. A lot of learnings. It was probably the thing that Cork needed, because their season was probably, there was a potential that the season could snowball and really come out of control. Whereas by getting that All-Ireland Cup semi-final, maybe they might have learned an awful lot that they could come into this sort of game against Galway in a much better position. Like, you look back when they played earlier in the season, it was a slippy bounce of a ball that slid over the keeper's head. That sort of in injury time was the difference from when Jenna Slattery's long range effort. So there wasn't a lot between them earlier in the season. I do think Galway have taken a massive step on, but I'd be intrigued to see where Cork are now, considering the bit of form they picked up before the break.
Yeah, Heidi O'Sullivan, the only signing I'm aware of anyway down in Cork. Will she make the impact that Cork might want? Didn't really work out for her at Treaty either. 1 goal in 20 odd games in the last couple of seasons.
It'd be interesting to know, but then again, you look at when they brought Jessie Mendes back into Cork, that sort of worked a lot better after being with Treaty. So it's hard to know whether Heidi will have that sort of impact from her an underage international as well. So could work well. Maybe Danny Murphy might put a little arm around the shoulder and say, "This is what I want you to do," and it'll be intriguing. There hasn't been that much movements in the off season. Probably a little bit in the mid season. Probably a little bit less than we maybe expected this year. And I'd say for Cork, we'll probably see the bones of that team that started the All-Ireland Cup semi-final.
I would expect so as well. Yeah, Treaty and Shels, of course, we touched on it with Rachel. It's very hard to see anything other than a Shels win. The Treaty just re-released their squad list, I suppose. Couple of ins, couple of outs. Not anything major, though, and nothing that kind of caught either of us by surprise.
No, nothing that's caught us by surprise. But from reading on social media, it looks as though they made a couple of tweaks in their systems and stuff like that during the breaks. So it'll be interesting to see how they got on, how they sort of second half of the season, because they made a good impression on people in the first half of the season. So Alban Hoy said if he can pick up a couple of wins or a couple of results in the second half, it'd be good for them. It's probably just a case of, hate to say it, but if they can keep Shels to 1 or 2-0, they'll look at that as a positive from a Shels viewpoint. The first game without Jessie Stapleton, be intrigued to see how Maggie Pearce gets on alongside Pearl Slattery. Sort of Maggie was playing as a right fullback for the first half of the season, and then when Pearl got injured, she slotted into centre back alongside Jessie, and she's probably been the club's best player this season. So interested to see how she gets on. And I think for Shels, it's a big couple of weeks, and it's really important that they do get the win. They do get the win in Limerick.
Shels have lost so many players over the last few seasons. It's when you see the list, it's jarring how many.
But then you look at what keeps coming through. Like as Rachel said it earlier, young Hannah Healy is an absolute smashing player. Rebecca Dever would have played a lot more for them in the first half of the season if she didn't pick up an ankle injury. Like, and then you see they're adding more. Like I remember chatting to, he's now the Athlone assistant manager, Ken Kieran, at one of the All-Ireland Cup games he was out watching Peamount and Wexford, and he was talking about the youngsters and Shels coming through, and like the high hope, the high praise he was talking about some of these players as well, I think. And so the conveyor belt is continuing to go. So they're going to continue to churn down players. It's just important the next couple of years that they can hold on to them for a little bit longer and hold on to them until if they go abroad. But then again, they're going to need support from other outsources like the FAI, government, and things like that. Because you can't expect. I know they've new owners, but you can't expect new owners just to start throwing free money and being like, "Here, just spend what you want." That's not a good look either. That's not a way of improving women's football.
No, given the current crop of players, just added money is probably not. It needs to go in and grassroots and develop it from the bottom up. Wexford Youths, DLR Waves, kind of a. I don't want to say a nothing season for both sides, but they've really kind of just been in the league. What do you even say about the game?
I was literally, I'm no disrespect to either club. I was nearly going to say it's a nothing game, because that's what it nearly is. They've, in terms of the league wise, they've nothing to play for, and they play each other next week again in the FAI Cup. So, like, it's probably just a little bit of a dress rehearsal for the FAI Cup. I think both sides will be looking to see if they can have a bit of a cup run. From a Wexford viewpoint, there's no doubt the first half of the season has been atrocious for them. The players they should have been getting better results, and they'll be looking to pick up that little bit of form, and maybe this is the opportunity for them to start. Like, if they go unbeaten for the rest of the season, potentially they could catch a Bows or a Galway and sort of put a little bit of a, how would you say, a little bit of a better look back on their season. But where they are in the table at the minute, it looks awful from a Wexford viewpoint, considering the players they have. From a DLR viewpoint, it was always going to be a horrible season for them, just considering what they had lost and the changes that have happened in terms of, players going out there, and Graham leaving as well. Laura's come in trying to steady the ship. It's been a difficult one for them. Yes, they nearly made the semi-finals of the All-Ireland Cup, but like it's been a hard slog for DLR this season. I think they'll both of them teams probably have a massive eye on that cup game next week, and hoping if they can get a bit of a cup run.
Yeah, some big changes as well. Sligo Rovers make the trip to Athlone for the last game of the weekend. Scarlett Heron, a big loss for Athlone. Your thoughts on that move? Is it a good move for her, considering the competition she would have for place in Shamrock Rovers versus maybe almost guaranteed game she had with Athlone?
I think it's a great move for her. And the reason why is because Rovers are crying out for midfielders. Absolutely crying out for someone to play in the centre midfield. And it's something that I said during the season, earlier in the season to you here on the show, and I've said on social media. That's Rovers' biggest weakness this season has been central midfielders. The only thing I will say is I'm probably surprised they haven't brought in another one or two in that sort of area just to give it a bit of backup. I would honestly expect Scarlett Heron to probably start for them, and then in their next game. From an Athlone viewpoint, yeah, it's a big loss. They brought in a couple of players from America we don't really know an awful lot about. I think from an Athlone viewpoint, the signing of Katie Keane for me is a very good signing and goal. I would expect Katie to play and Katie to sort of make an impact.
Well, they've signed an American goalkeeper as well, so it's going to be interesting to see how that team gets picked on Saturday as well. Lauren Carabin comes in from Monmouth College, which of course is the alma mater of Maddie Gibson and Dana Sharif, who've lit the league up in the last 18 months. So we'd expect her to be a similar standard, potentially, or have the same kind of impact, because they're both players that everyone in the league is.
Question for you is that old agent Dana at the helm again? Considering she got Maddie in, she told us about the story of getting Maddie into Athlone as well. Is that agent Dana at the forefront again?
Listen, if she is, she deserves a raise. Is all I'm saying, because she's bringing in players that caliber.
Listen, the first two that they brought in from Monmouth have been good. So got high expectations on the next one.
No pressure at all on Lauren there on that one. In terms of Sligo, we've seen a few players, I suppose, leave the club rather than going elsewhere. They just seem to have left and gone back maybe to local football. There is a new junior league starting in Sligo, and of course the Mayo League is fairly vibrant as well. So a few have just chosen maybe to go back to that level, or have played Gaelic football or whatever it might be. Amy Mahon, who impressed last year, she's left the club, been replaced by Quiva O'Reilly as goalkeeper. She comes in from, I think, the 5th or 6th tier in England. I could be wrong. It might be the 4th.
As high as 2nd tier in England, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but the last couple of seasons hasn't been at a level that you'd feel it gives you confidence coming in from that level, coming in and being an impact player. Like I'd be worried with Sligo for the. I've said that a lot on the show.
Be interesting if Bonnie McKernan can keep her place in goal there for them. But the other thing for me is you have to realize as well, they're missing Emma Hansbury this weekend. Emma's at the World Cup, so Emma won't be back.
We saw her on the TV.
I was actually chatting to her over, and I seen her over in Brisbane after the last Ireland game. I was chatting to her for a minute. But like she won't be there, so it's definitely going to be a difficult second half of the season. I'd love to speak to someone in Sligo just to see how do you keep the motivation going when things haven't gone their way. They've obviously managed to keep hold of Emma Doherty. There was a little bit of talk that would she go, would she stay, what was going to happen with her. In fact, they managed to keep her is probably the biggest positive. But they're going to be probably over reliant on the likes of Emma and Casey Howe in the second half of the season.
Yeah, Aoife Hearn and Orno Dowd as well. Two players I'm surprised to see dropping out of that side as well. But it has been a great 12 months for Sligo since they beat Shels around this time last year, I think. It's kind of been slim pickings results.
One win against Clarke.
Yeah, it's been a rough period, but they do have enough quality in that side if they can get it all together on the same day to take points off. Probably 5 or 6 teams in this league. You'd expect them. They beat Shels last year. They beat Wexford last year with more or less the same group of players. Keela Scanlon's been injured now. She'll miss the rest of the season. But yeah, Sligo. I'm the jury's out on how they're going to get on for the second half of the season. We haven't really talked about Shamrock Rovers as well, of course, as well as bringing in from Athlone, Scarlett Heron. They've also signed Joy Ralph from DLR. And again, I'm going to ask the same question. Has she moved from a place where she's going to play every week to where there's any amount of forwards in Shamrock Rovers who can challenge for those starting positions?
I had heard that Joy would be on the move. So it was, if she didn't go to Rovers, I think she may have went somewhere else. So it was a case that where was she going to land? If she can learn a lot off Collie O'Neill, learn a lot off the likes of Anya O'Gorman, maybe it's a case that they're looking at her more as a player for the future that could really that they could benefit from. And she hasn't played a lot of football in the last year either, so that's probably something as well. So it's one of them that we probably have to keep an eye on and see what happens with her in the next couple of weeks.
finish it off, let's take a look at the league table. No, we won't, because it was decided it doesn't want to work for me. I'm just going to try and get it back here again. We did have a technical problem just before we started the show.
Love our modern day technology.
No, it doesn't want to come up for us. But there's a 6-point gap. We've talked about it enough today. There's a 6-point gap between Peamount and the next two sides in the league table, Shels and Shamrock Rovers, who of course are idle this weekend, all with the same number of games played, 7 to go in the league. Peamount in the driving seat, but we have seen twists and turns in the run into the title when two teams, both of the last 2 seasons, seem to have the title nailed on. Peamount couldn't hold on 2 years ago. Shels just about did last year. It'll be interesting to see how that all pans out this year. We've talked about the fight that Shels will want to keep that title. But plenty of action the whole way down through the table. We'll be seeing teams pick up. I do want to finish before the hour. We've got 10 seconds. Last thoughts. Who's going to win on Sunday, Aaron?
England.
Plenty of time to talk about that on our preview show on Saturday. Talk to you then.